Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, and welcome to the 7th anniversary of Taking Issue, the #1 YouTube show about comics being reviewed by a cartoon of a guy named after an amalgamated kitchen utensil that at least 3 people actually watch. Yeah! Last year saw us focus on comics that were based on animation, like some G.I. Joe, returning to the early 2000s reboot of He-Man, and adaptations of cartoons that were adaptations of comics, such as Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker, and the first 3 issues of X-Men Evolution, which were kind of like prequel stories to the main series. Also the first story arcs for 2 separate Gargoyles comics, the introductory issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from Mirage, and probably last year's most popular video, my Valentine's Day special about comic-based cartoons. We also looked at the first appearance of Stephanie Brown, the Spoiler, had our 300th episode, which saw me review the Young Justice story arc that involved a version of Cassandra Cain, which I did while tied up at the mercy of some disembodied voice that dropped an anvil on my head. Not exactly where I saw this show going, but there you are. And the first Uncanny X-Men arc by Chuck Austin. And despite how much he's been maligned over the years by the fanbase, and how many stories of his that I've read that I didn't really like, it was good. I was actually pretty surprised myself. But the biggest thing throughout 2023 was my review of Tom King's entire run of Batman, from I Am Gotham to City of Bane. And while I had my ups and downs with the story, the biggest issue was the duration. Seriously, it was so long. I probably should have jogged and weight trained for a couple of months just to build up the stamina. But here in 2024, I'm kicking off the 8th season with an apology. If you've been watching my show, you might have noticed that, over the years, I named a certain writer maybe a few times. You know I'm no fan of James Tynion IV. James Tynion IV on the main story, again scripted by Tynion and Snyder. James Tynion IV on script. Tynion IV scripted issue 50 shows us the double-sized issue is scripted by James Tynion IV. And when mentioning this particular writer, I've said some things. It's been suddenly rebooted by James Tynion IV, because being stuck at the bottom of the sea and unable to function truly speaks to what a spacefaring vessel is. I've avoided calling James Tynion IV outright a bad writer. Clearly shows a preference for Harper Row. Can't seem to figure out a way to flesh characters out organically over time. Loves these characters so much, decided everything about her had to change in order to further showcase Harper Row. His quite obvious emotional manipulation. Characters that are supposed to be really smart or even commonly intelligent, but end up being very moronic. It is not a good way to develop one character by tearing down other perfectly good characters. Things said that were meant to both critique the work I was looking at, as well as entertain with humor and maybe a dash of snark. But hey, why have deduction from the world's greatest detective in Detective Comics? That's just nutty. Clayface, who's been a metamorph for years, seems to forget sometimes how to use his powers, and for such an allegedly good actor that spent time around Batman, couldn't get even a mild impersonation right. I feel so confident about this. My hopes that this comic will be an improvement over its predecessor dissolve evermore. That would be a better fit in an obscure prose story on fanfiction.net. And Basil needs to know how to rumble without his powers because, much like the writer, he lacks fundamentals. Praising characters for things that happened before they were reinvented, and a clear committal to terrible versions of said characters. But Tynion's lackadaisical effort wastes it all. One issue in and I can smell all the trappings of what makes Tynion such a subpar writer. And if so inclined, one could argue the veracity and accuracy of the certain things I have said. He comes off as very self-indulgent despite his limited skill, expecting reader nostalgia in the works of predecessors to do most of the heavy lifting for him, writing brief moments in stories that artists make look good but doesn't make any sense in terms of the narrative or overall development. He wants to inject his influence into events he had nothing to do with, and incapable of doing anything more than surface-level observations of characters or their world, that he tries to pass off as much deeper and more insightful than they really are, along with his hackneyed poetry. He's just doing a poorer job of what was already done right the first time. It's dumb writing pretending to be smart. He had to inject his pseudo-poetic narration to spoon-feed the reader. Because Tynion likes copying things done by better writers, at the same time relying on and disregarding them because he thinks a few rhyme schemes make him a master poet. If I were to choose a canvas on which to paint the perfect partner, it would look like Harper Row. That's something Tynion wrote, the editors approved, and DC printed. Isn't that so clever and smart and deep and meaningful? However, over time you can learn something new that perhaps puts certain things in a new light, a new context. It's just such terrible writing and terrible character development, non-existent character development. What is wrong with you, you ridiculous, sewage-spewing, trash-huffing? Be happy she needlessly risked your life, or she'll tease you about how stupid your old clothes are. Reticulated shark smuggling. Just have her charge an enemy on one page, go to another couple of scenes, then return to her a few pages later to have all the enemies beaten. Just do that over and over. Glass-gnawing, dirty diaper-hoarding, inept, boneheaded, broken clock-trusting. These characters aren't consistent. They're only as good as Tynion wants to give the good vibes for characters to win, but then suddenly morons in order to make the stakes seem raised. It's all very, very stupid and kind of disturbing. Albanian light socket kissing. Because it's not about how he came back, it's about how you were supposed to feel, so who needs a coherent story? I don't care if the intent was for hugs and happy faces, this is still dumb. He's still relying on telling over showing, convenient skills to try forcing the reader to be impressed, emotional manipulation, terrible character favoring, good character shafting. This is not an arc, let alone an emotional one. It's a garbled mess from someone who doesn't understand the character or writing as well as he says he does. No good, non-witted, narratively stunted chunder monkeys! And if one is willing and open enough, they can make appropriate changes. Though doing so can be very difficult for anyone. Writing Cassandra Cain is so effortless when you don't put in the effort and it's really just a shadow of the former character. Throughout his run, he's shown more affection for his own basic writing than any of these characters. All he does is find ways to make her sad and alone, completely misses the mark, and replaces something good with a terrible replication like a Disney live-action remake. These are the choices Tinian made. This isn't Cassandra Cain. This is a heartless, barely recognizable replica he put half a thought into. Why is it all so very stupid? There is nothing special about James Tinian IV's writing. So yeah, I can safely say, he's a bad writer. So without any further stalling, let me just admit right now I was wrong. His name is actually pronounced Tinian. I guess his Tumblr handle is Tiny Onion, which the more I thought about it, I figured it was a mnemonic device to pronounce his name, so it hasn't been Tinian like I was saying for years, it was actually Tinian. And yeah, I have been saying the more correct way lately, it's just like, I thought I'd just address it, just air it all out, get it right out there, so there's no confusion. I acknowledged that I was wrong, and I apologize about the pronunciation of his name. What? What'd you think I was going to say?
How about if I pound your head straight down into your tummy?
And with that out of the way, let's take a gander at what we have in store for this season. Geez, this is because I tricked my audience into watching a clip show, isn't it? Well, didn't really help the first 3 times, maybe the 4th time's the charm. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.